This is the show where myself, Preet Banerjee, and Derek Fung, we take a look into some of the largest purchase panels in North America to see how people are really spending their money. And this week, Derek, we're going to be talking about the whole buy now, pay later model. That seems to be growing by leaps and bounds. What can you tell us about what buy now, pay later looks like to consumers?
So the buy now, pay later model, it's been around for a couple of years. How it works, and I'll use a very simple example. One of their most popular stores is Peloton. So you want to get a beautiful brand new Peloton bike. Upfront, it costs about 2,500 bucks. Many
Which
consumers
is
don't have,
crazy, by the way.
which is pretty wild. And Many consumers don't have the money. So what they'll do is at checkout, they'll select one of these companies. One of them being Affirm, founded by the former CTO of PayPal. You hit Affirm, and you can pay the 2,500 bucks over monthly installments, charged straight to your bank account on a monthly basis. So you're
So,
spreading out
so
the costs essentially.
Yeah, so these buy now, pay later models really, instead of using your credit card where you say, or put the full balance and I'll determine how long I'm going to pay it off, basically these intermediaries come and say, well, it's going to be a specific amount per month. Some of them charge interest, but a lot of the new ones have this sort of zero interest buy now, pay later model where you basically circumvent the credit card and go through them. So this has been picking up a lot of steam, and so that's why we're focusing in on it this week in this episode of Spent. So let's take a look at some of the data here. So
Yeah.
talk to us about the overall trend over the last year.
Yeah, it's clearly up and to the right. You've seen across all the major companies double-digit, triple-digit growth. If you take a look at some of the big ones, AfterPay, Klarna, Affirm, very clearly last year versus now, a ton more consumers are using it. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One, consumers want to save money more than ever. But two, with the rapid shift of e-commerce, really coming online, Shopify today announcing some pretty killer earnings. A
Yeah.
lot of consumers, are just more open to this model than ever before. And again, a big part of that is also driven by the rise of e-commerce over the last couple of months.
Yeah, and we see from this chart here, just taking a look at some of the players here. So Afterpay has about 70% of the 0% buy now, pay later market in the US. Klarna is, growing by leaps and bounds. If you take a look at their trend, looking at a base level of 100 a year ago, they're at 880 of that 100 index level. So, almost 9 times growth in the last year. So pretty explosive growth. And when we take a look at the transaction frequency, per month of people who are using buy now, pay later, that has also grown as well. So the people who are using it are also starting to use it more. It's not just new customers, it's people are really starting to move towards this model. And part of that is because it's made available at checkout online. Now,
Yes.
what's really interesting to me, and I think we can break this down, is the gender mix. And so this chart here on the left, it shows that women are 70% of the volume of these buy now, pay later transactions. And so that's quite a shocking skew, but it's not because they're women. Why is there such a skew here, Derek?
Yeah, it all comes down to the merchants that are offering buy now, pay later. One of the most popular ones being Peloton. Almost every Peloton sale goes through one of the buy now, pay later companies. So again, I'll repeat that. It's a pretty wild fact. Almost every person who buys a Peloton at checkout selects one of these providers and doesn't pay for the bike up front, pays for it over a couple months, months or years. And so, yeah, it comes down to the merchant. And again, Peloton being such a big one as of late, with their consumer base also being skewed towards women, they're one of the examples of the merchants that offer these services. And so it all comes down to the merchants that are offering buy now, pay later, and that's what skewed some of the numbers that you're seeing here.
Right. So essentially what you're saying is that it's not that women are more likely to say, hey, I'm going to use buy now, pay later in general. It's just that the buy now, pay later operators have partnered with merchants who tend to target or sell products that are disproportionately bought by women. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting distinction to make. And this chart here about age, I mean, there's nothing really earth-shattering about this. Buy now, pay later tends to skew towards younger people. And I think part of that is younger people may have a bit of an aversion to credit card use because of crushing debt loads. So they're looking for alternatives, although this is another form of credit in a sense. But again, so nothing earth-shattering there. Now, if we take a look at pre-COVID and what's happened now, again, this is very fascinating to me, especially this chart here on the left. So we're looking at the trends by change in income status as a result of COVID. And so there's three categories. In pink, people who have not had a change in income or have seen a moderate increase in their income, so not really affected. Then we've got in green the partial income loss, so people have been somewhat hit to their income because of COVID. And then you have people who have completely lost their income, they've lost their jobs. And it's that black line that really stands out to me. If you look at that peak around the end of 2019, the Christmas buying period, you can see there's a big spike in activity. But these are the people who then lost their jobs after that because of COVID. And their spending on these buy now, pay laters is actually, you can't see it from the chart, but the numbers themselves, it's just a little bit higher than the Christmas spending. So it's a testament to how powerful these buy now, pay laters models are when it comes to stretching your cash flow over time.
Yeah, and also you could argue a lot of these e-commerce platforms are for discretionary items and not consumer staples like groceries and food. And so you could argue a lot of the people that are using these platforms, they are buying things that they don't necessarily need. And that said, they have the money to buy some of these things anyway, and they just want to leverage some of these platforms because many of them are offering zero interest. It's a no-brainer. It's really a no-brainer to use a lot of these platforms, and so that's why you're seeing such huge growth, especially as of late.
Okay, let's take a look at credit utilization at the time of the first buy now, pay later transaction for a consumer. And the credit utilization in the methodology in the data that you have, I'll just note that it's different than the standard definition of credit utilization, which is the percentage of your balance versus your total credit limit. That would be the credit utilization. Whereas in the data that you have, you can't really figure out people's credit limit, but the highest amount of balance they ever carried. So it's a slightly different definition of credit utilization, but basically in this model, the data is basically saying what is the balance of people's credit cards or debt as a percentage of the most they've ever carried. That's the credit utilization. But still, what is kind of striking to me is that people had a lot of credit utilization at the time of their first buy now, pay later transaction, which tells me that some people are using this as a sort of a last resort because they can't really afford it and they're already carrying a lot of debt. So these aren't necessarily good behaviors for at least some people. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of, and these are big purchases as well. So I think definitely some people aren't using it the right way. And there's a lot of others who are buying their Pelotons and can fully afford it, but just don't want to stomach the whole cost up front and want to pay paid off in installments over 12, 18 months type of
so the last thing I'll point out here is that what is that light bluish green hue that represents a credit utilization of over 75% at the time of the first buy now, pay later transaction, and that share of all consumers who are using BNPL is 62%. It's very high.
Yeah.
Now, further digging into the data, you guys have amazing data. This one is interesting here. So this is now looking at the basically the bank account balance versus the purchase price of what they're buying using these buy now, pay later models. And at the very bottom, that is an average of about 20%. And these are the people that cannot cover the purchase price based on what's in their bank account. So that's about 21% who are basically saying they do not have the money to pay for this up front, and they have no other option but to spread it out in some form. Could be a credit card, could be a loan. In this case, it's the buy now, pay later models. But the vast majority of people have more than 5 times the value of whatever they're buying sitting in their bank account. So it's not all people who are necessarily desperate. There is a
Yeah.
choice factor here.
There's a choice, and again, I think it also goes back to the types of merchants that the buy now, pay later companies target to work with, like the Pelotons of the world, higher end products. So I think there's a bit of a self-fulfilling element to this where, people that are buying from these places are buying things that, again, aren't, consumer staples or things they need. It's often products that are good to have. And so that's where you see that vast majority of the consumers that use these services do have the money to cover the purchases. So
So here's I think, kind of like the acid test question. And that is, if, say, Peloton didn't have these checkout offers where you could use a buy now, pay later intermediary, do you think Peloton sales would be where they are right now?
no, definitely not. Definitely not. I myself, having bought one and done the buy now, pay later option, it makes it that much more of a no-brainer. And to spread your payments out, especially many of these services offering, zero interest promotions, and I think that's what they have to do to get consumers to adopt and use. And they're probably losing money because they're offering 0% interest, but very clearly it's a space that's heating up. Shopify just announced over the last couple of days their partnership with Affirm. So now across all Shopify, when you're checking out, you can choose to buy now, pay later with Affirm. So I think it's only getting started, this market. AfterPay is an Australian company, and they've come to the US and very quickly have gotten millions of users pretty much overnight. And so super exciting to see all the growth. And, I think it's only getting started. So as e-commerce continues to pick up, we think so will this buy now, pay later industry.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that this model is going to grow even more in the future. As you know, wearing my personal finance guy hat, I'll point out that when people think in terms of monthly payments and how they can make things fit into their monthly budget, I think it does tend to lead them to spend more money. And also the whole idea of buy now, pay later, 0% interest, what have you, it's not really a new model. It's definitely newer in the e-commerce space, but this is something that's been around for, honestly, hundreds of years, and it's called
Yeah.
factoring. And this is where companies can basically sell their accounts receivable to a third party with
Yeah.
a bit of a discount, so say 95 cents on the dollar. That third party now is in charge of recovering the payments, those accounts receivable, and they make the spread.
Yeah.
And this is very similar to, in some countries around the world, when it comes to making purchases on credit cards, especially credit cards that have big reward programs, people who pay cash are effectively paying the same price as someone who pays for it with a credit card but gets reward points or a percentage reward on their spending. And so one of the things that people have an issue with is that the cash consumers are subsidizing the reward programs of people who have credit cards. And so they will try to demand a cash discount. And I don't know if that's going to happen online. I don't know if the consumers are going to say, hey, you know what? It's the same price. So to them, it looks the same, but they pay zero interest and they get to spread out their payments and spread out their cash flow. And I think it does lead to more frivolous spending. I think
Yeah.
if you have more pain of having to fork over $2,500 for an exercise bike, you're probably
Yeah.
less likely to do it. But this is the way the world is going, and it's something that people need to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
So thank you
Yeah.
so much for talking about this data. This is really fascinating stuff.
Yeah. It's as I said, I think it's only getting started. The biggest opportunity is, all these buy now, pay later companies are trying to build a direct relationship with you as a consumer. So, if a firm can get a good view of Preet and how Preet spends and saves, and where this model is very different from, the models of the past, is its reliance on data and the ability to get a more 360 view of your total spend. Because if you're buying a Peloton through a firm, and you're also buying, a bunch of other stuff, they've got a pretty good view of your spending. And I think that's the holy grail. If they can get to scale, get a much clearer view of the consumer and how they spend, I think there's an opportunity to rethink a lot of financial, personal finance types of metrics, things like your credit score, things like personalized interest rates for each person based on their data of you. So I think it's a big data play. And I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
Shopify partnering with one of the big ones is a testament to, the space really starting to heat up. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch, and excited to follow. And if you haven't seen the report, it'll be published on the Cartify website, cartify.ai, this week.
Wonderful. Derek, thanks so much for joining us this week. We'll talk to you in the next episode. And yeah, this data has been amazing. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Preet.